By the late 60s, British bands like Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple and The Who were getting more ambitious with rock music, experimenting with extended tracks and concept albums. In 1970, in what would prove to be the most radical evolution of the British musical yet, two aspiring young songwriters released a record that fused rock with opera.
Jesus Christ Superstar is the first truly great, truly British rock opera, because it's structured like an opera. Suddenly there was no speaking. This thing is sung all the way through. But it's sung to the rhythms and to the beats of the 60s generation.
David Land is an agent who looks after the Dagenham Girl Pipers and the Harlem Globetrotters. He feels the next big trend could be Jesus Christ Superstar.
Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber would each bring very different qualities to the British musical. While both fans of rock music, lyricist Rice knew next to nothing about musical theatre. Lloyd Webber lived and breathed it.
When we came to work together, I was probably less conventional than he was. He was very much in the Broadway West End tradition. I had ideas that weren't perhaps traditional. So the combination of my being slightly uneducated about musicals and Andrew being very educated about musicals worked.
I don't see why he moves me.
Released in 1970, if the album was a hit, Rice and Lloyd Webber could attract interest from theatre producers and turn Superstar into a fully blown stage musical.
We only released the album because nobody wanted to do the show, and it was not a hit in Britain. And as it had been a #1 album in America, hugely successful, it was logical to do it on Broadway first.
Jesus, you started to believe the things they say of you. You really do believe this talk of God is true.
Hair had previously introduced sex, nudity and drugs to the theatre, but it seemed setting the final days of Jesus Christ to rock music was a step too far. Superstar opened on Broadway in October 1971 to the outrage of Christian groups and a lukewarm reception from the press.
It didn't work largely because the young kids who'd originally bought the album wouldn't have been seen dead on Broadway in those days. So we were slightly ahead of our time. All right, there'd been Hair before, but Hair probably got people in because everybody got their kit off.
They found the new Messiah.
Even with the shaky start on Broadway, producer Robert Stigwood had plans for an opening in the West End. But Rice and Lloyd Webber saw their careers faltering before they even got started.
Tim and Andrew were terrified. They fought me tooth and nail not to open it. Descended on me at 2 o'clock in the morning. You'll ruin our reputation. You'll ruin us, you'll ruin us.
Everything's all right, yes, everything's fine, and we want you to sleep well tonight.
With producer Robert Stigwood holding the rights, the West End's latest protégés had to put their nerves to one side as press attention in Superstar started to grow.
They did a thing with the newspapers, the search for Jesus is on, a bit like the X Factor, you know, we're looking for Jesus. And finally, after extensive auditions, going back and back and back, I finally got the part. And I was surrounded by press, and I made my very first mistake. Some guy shoved a pint of beer in my hand, right, and said, cheers, right? And the shot in the paper was, Jesus is having a pint. And I thought, oh, never again.
We had nuns protesting with placards outside the theatre, and everybody would say to me, Anthony, that's brilliant, you know, well done for doing all that. They did it off their own back. I wasn't telling them to do it.
The title was so radical, calling Jesus Christ a superstar. I mean, we had people out front protesting just on the basis of the title.
It seemed to me that it was perfectly possible to take Bible stories and tell them in a new way through contemporary music. And that's really all we were trying to do.
Superstar opened in August 1972 to universally good reviews. The radical interpretation of the Gospels moving audience, critics, and even the cast.
It was very overwhelming, because I remember the first time I went up on this cross. And now, I'm not a religious guy at all. And I was sort of sitting on a bicycle seat, but you couldn't see it, and I was holding onto a frame that you also couldn't see. So I looked like I was hanging in midair. And for me, you know, when they started playing that John 49, that Gethsemane music that he'd written, I mean, just tears were streaming down me. And it really was a very, very moving moment. And I guess for a lot of the audience, seeing that and hearing that music for the first time, they would have felt the same way.
With the West End audience seemingly more spiritually relaxed than on Broadway, Superstar appealed to believer and non-believer alike.
This was something that people could relate to. And its producer, Robert Stigwood, created this incredibly ingenious idea, which had never been done before, of replicating the production around the globe.
It was Robert who realised that you had to roll these musicals out very fast, and in fact he changed the whole way the musical theatre was considered. And I owe a huge debt to him, because it was Robert's gamble and his sort of showmanship that I guess I learned an awful lot from.
I wanna see my God.
Earlier British musicals like Oliver had found success by trading on their Britishness. The story of Jesus Christ was universal, allied with a contemporary soundtrack and modern staging, and its appeal could be limitless. But the rollout wasn't without its complications.
When we put on in Paris, the Archbishop of Paris and a cardinal were at the first night. I was next to them, and Andrew the other side, and Andrew was very unhappy. So he jumped out of his seat and, swearing, effing and blinding. Oh, terrible, terrible. Take this off, take this off. And he ended up running down the aisle, shouting, "This must be stopped, this must be stopped." And I had the embarrassing scene of, in front of the audience, having to pinion him against the corner of the proscenium arch to calm him down.
Andrew was always much more caught up in it. He was, it mattered more to him. I mean, of course it mattered to me, but it's rather hard to explain. But I think the success of Superstar, and indeed Andrew's musical career, mattered enormously to him, which is to his great credit. I think what mattered to me more was that just life went okay, and this was one aspect of it.